National Guard, I guessed. They were wearing that grayish urban camo they wear these days. They had parked a green truck across the intersection where the hospital driveway met the road. Cars were lined up trying to get out, and soldiers were going down the line and issuing instructions to angry drivers. Up by the truck, a soldier raised a bullhorn and said, "Attention! Do not leave the area. There is a significant chance you have been exposed to a contagious pathogen. Leaving the area could lead to spreading the infection to your family and friends. By order of the Centers for Disease Control, you are not to leave the area. Please go back to the lobby of the hospital where you will be given further instructions. This is for your own safety. We apologize for the inconvenience, and you will be released as soon as it is determined that you do not pose an infection risk to those around you. Thank you for your cooperation. If you attempt to leave the area, you will be prosecuted. Do not attempt to leave the area." John tossed down his cigarette, stamped it out, and said, "Let's leave the area." "Yeah." We left the reporter behind and circled around, looking for a way out. We found the ambulance-only entrance around the block had a Humvee across it. The soldiers were forming a perimeter, camouflaged dots looping around the grounds. We looked around behind the building, where there was a little strip of woods separating the hospital grounds from town. Same scene, with the addition of some guys unloading spools of razor wire from the back of a truck. John spat and said, "This might sound like an odd thing to say right at this moment, but I wish those guys were wearing hazmat suits. Yeah, or at least something covering their mouths. There wouldn't happen to be a door around here, would there? A door? You know, one of the... Oh, there's not one in the hospital as far as I know. That would have been awfully convenient, though." John thought for a moment, then said, "What about BB's? It's right on the other side of the trees there." BB's was a convenience store about 2 blocks away, but on the other side of that little wooded area. Among those trees was a deep drainage ditch we'd also have to cross. Man, I don't know. He edged around to get a look at the guardsman standing between us and the woods. He said, "Come on. We wait till that guy goes to help unload some more of that wire, then run right through the gap there. But if we're gonna do it, we have to do it now, before the sun comes all the way up. And what makes you think those other guys won't shoot us in the head? They're not gonna do that. All these guys know is they got up in the wee hours of the morning to fence off a hospital because a guy went on a shooting rampage, and they're afraid some diseases may have escaped. They don't know there's a, monster situation going on. And you know all of that how? TJ Fry is over on the other side. You remember TJ? Came to that party a few years ago and stuck his dick in the jelly. He's like a sergeant now. Said they haven't been told shit. Well, they're gonna chase us. Yeah, but we just gotta make it to BB's. John stripped off his shirt and started wrapping it around his face, like he was ready to join some riot in the Middle East. Cover your face unless you want them to identify you and show up at your house in an hour. Peering through a 1/4-inch slit of wrapped t-shirt, we crouched low and stayed in the shadows until we reached the narrow stretch of lawn between us and the woods. We stayed like that for about 15 minutes until one guard left his post to accept a cup of coffee from another. We sprinted. I immediately slipped in the wet grass and fell on my face. My shirt mask slipped over my eyes. I scrambled to my feet and just ran as hard and fast as I could, nearly blind. I heard shouted commands, but no gunshots. A branch slapped me in the face, and I knew I had reached the woods. I stumbled and clawed the shirt away from my eyes, just in time to feel the ground give way under me. I was sliding down an embankment of wet grass and dead leaves, then splashed into freezing ankle-deep water. It was dark. There had been an early morning gloom out on the lawn, but it was still midnight under the trees. No sign of John or anyone else. I sloshed through the water and scrambled up the other side, pulling myself up with handfuls of weeds, knocking aside discarded grocery bags and flattened plastic Coke bottles. A hand latched around my ankle. A different hand latched around my wrist. John up top, one of the soldiers on bottom. For a ridiculous moment, I was pulled in opposite directions like a cartoon character, both men shouting frantic instructions at me. I tried to kick free and accidentally kicked the guy in the head in the process. It worked. In 3 seconds, John and I were out of the woods and sprinting diagonally across a parking lot, through the bay of a car wash, down an alley, and toward the gray bricks and rusting dumpster that was the ass end of BB's convenience store. I risked a look over my shoulder. Shit! There were no fewer than 10 soldiers following us now, the 2 in the lead carrying black plastic pistols with neon green tips. They looked like toys, but I knew they were tasers. I was eager to avoid my 5th lifetime tasering, if at all possible. The restroom door was on the exterior of the store, around the corner to our left. I rushed up to it, grabbed a rickety knob and... Locked! I said, trying to catch my breath. The key! Inside! You have to get the key from the counter inside! John shoved me aside, reared back, and kicked the door. The whole knob and latch mechanism exploded. We crammed ourselves inside, pushing the broken door closed. 1, 2, 3... Hey, you two! Get the fuck out of there and lay the fuck down on the pavement before we have to... The soldier was cut off in mid-word. I pulled open the door to find we were surrounded by panties. We stepped out of the ladies' dressing room at the Walmart on the opposite side of town. John and I had traveled about 2.5 miles in approximately 0 seconds. Right now, at BB's, several very confused National Guardsmen were staring at an extremely filthy and completely empty public bathroom. We stepped into the aisle of the nearly empty store. 2 muddy men with t-shirts wrapped around their heads. John unwrapped his and said, "What is this, Walmart?" So, I wasn't completely honest with the psychiatrist about the whole thing with the mysterious door in the burrito stand and the Asian dude who disappeared into it. John and I have identified half a dozen of those doors around town, and we know where they lead. To each other. The only thing is, you never knew to which of the other doors they were going to take you. It was basically doorway roulette. I mean, you're not going to step out in Beijing or anything. It's always another door around town. All the ones we've found, anyway. But they never seem to go to the same place twice. Why? Because this whole town is fucked up, that's why. I keep trying to tell you that. You don't want to come here. It's exhausting. John and I didn't draw much attention as we moved through the store, since at this particular store in this particular town, we weren't even the filthiest people there. We just walked right out the front door and headed back toward town along the shoulder of the highway. It was a wet, chilled morning under a lethargic November sky that had rolled out of bed and thrown on an old, gray, grease-stained t-shirt. John said, "Did you hear? They never found Frankie." "Wonderful. What do you think happened? You think that bug thing took over his brain?" "Hey, why not? You think he's gonna turn up again?" If you're asking yourself why the men with guns chasing us couldn't just use the magic door and follow us right to Walmart, it's because for most people, the doors are just doors. Same as for most people, the spider monster in my house would have been invisible, just as it was for Frankie. Same as how, if you'd been in the bathroom with me all those months ago when I saw that shadowy shape outside my shower, you'd have seen nothing. You might have sensed something, just as in your everyday life you might sit in a dark house and feel like you're not alone, or have a nagging suspicion that something slipped around a corner just a moment before you looked. The feeling can usually be expressed by the phrase, "Of course there's nothing there." Now. To be clear, if you've actually seen a ghost, that doesn't make you like us. A ghost sighting is usually nothing more than your brain trying to put a familiar face on something that does not have a face at all. John and I, on the other hand, can see what most of you can only sense. We're not special, it's just the result of some drugs we took. Just for future reference, if you're ever at a party and a Rastafarian offers you a syringe full of a slimy black substance that crawls around on its own like the blob, don't take it. And don't call us either. We get enough bullshit from strangers as it is. 25 hours prior to outbreak. English should have a word for that feeling you get when you first wake up in a strange room and have no freaking idea where you are. Hotezelment? I was cold, and every inch of my body was in pain. I heard a crunching, like the jaws of a predator grinding through bone. I pulled open my eyes. I saw a dragon standing proudly atop a hill before me. The dragon was on a TV screen. Beneath it was a video game console with a tangle of cords snaking across green carpet. I blinked, squinted at the sun burning in through a cracked window. I turned, hearing my neck creak as I did, and saw John sitting at a computer desk in the corner, staring into the monitor and holding a bottle full of a clear liquid that I'm sure you wouldn't want to try to put out a fire with. I sat up, realizing I'd been covered up with something in my sleep. I thought for a moment John had thrown a blanket over me, but closer inspection revealed it to be a beach towel. John glanced back at me from his computer chair and said, "Sorry, I used my spare blanket when I got that leak in my car." I looked around for the source of that animal crunching noise. I found Molly laying behind the couch, with her head crammed inside an open box of Cap'n Crunch cereal. She was eating as fast as she could, trying to use her paws to keep the box in place. "You're letting her do that?" "Oh yeah. Cereal is stale anyway. I don't have any dog food here." The dragon sat frozen on the television, the intro screen for a video game John had apparently been playing while I slept on his couch. "What time is it?" "Around 8. I stood and felt my head swim. I rubbed my eyes and almost screamed in pain from the wound there. My shoulder felt like it had taken a bullet, and it seemed like a pair of elves were trying to escape my skull through my temples using tiny pickaxes. It wasn't the first time I had woken up at John's place feeling like this. My phone screamed. The display read, "Amy." I closed my eyes, sighed, and answered. "Hey, baby." "Hi, David. I'm watching the news. What happened?" "Shouldn't you be in class?" Amy had failed a pretty basic English class last semester because it was a morning class and she kept sleeping through it. She said, "They canceled it. Oh, it's on again. Turn to CNN." I talked around the phone to John, told him to switch over the TV. He did, and watched as an early morning shot of the chaos at the hospital filled the screen. The name of the city was displayed along the bottom. National News. John turned up the sound, and we heard a female reporter say, "No history of drug use or mental illness. Frank Burgess had been with the department for 3 years. Authorities are combing the area for Burgess, but police say the number of wounds he sustained in the standoff make his turning up alive, quote, highly unlikely. Meanwhile, the hospital remains under quarantine due to unspecified infection risks that have only added to the anxiety in this shell-shocked community." They cut to a shot of our enormously fat chief of police, giving a soundbite in front of a bank of microphones. To Amy, I said, "Man, our chief of police is getting huge." Amy said, "They said 13 people were hurt, and I think 3 people died, but there could be more. Did you guys hear about this last night, when it was all going on?" A pause on my end. Too long. Finally, I said, "We heard about it, yeah." Uh-oh. "What?" "David, were you there? Were you guys in on this?" "What? No, of course not. Why would you think that?" "David." No, it was nothing. Guy just went crazy, that's all." "Are you lying?" No. She said nothing. She and the therapist knew the same trick. Filling the silence, I said, "I mean, we were there, but we weren't really involved." "I knew it. I'm coming down." "No, Amy, it's nothing, really. It's over. We just happened to be in the area." I heard John say, "Hey, it's me!" I turned to the television. Sure enough, John's face filled the screen. The reporter's voiceover covered the audio, saying, "But for every hour Burgess remains at large, fear and paranoia are bound to keep growing in this small city." On TV, John's voice faded in. "And then we saw a small creature crawl into his mouth. I wasn't 2 feet away. I saw it clearly. The thing wasn't from this world. I don't mean alien. I mean probably interdimensional in nature. I think it's obvious from what happened tonight that this being possessed some powers of mind control. I closed my eyes again and groaned. Amy said, "I'm coming down. I'll take the bus." "Forget it. Your classes are more important. If you fail English again, I think they can kick you out of the country. I think it's in the Patriot Act." "Gotta go, honey. I'm late for class." "You said you didn't..." "We'll talk about it later. Bye-bye." I killed the phone and looked for my shoes. "You going back home?" "I can't stay here, John." "Yeah, but, you know, you had that thing in your house. You think there's another one?" "I don't know, but what do you want me to do? Have the place sprayed?" "No, I'm just saying. That thing, it crawled inside Frankie and seemed to take him over." "Oh, that thing turned up in your bed. Are you assuming that's an accident? Because maybe we should consider that it was there for you." I can always trust John to think of things like this. "It don't matter, okay? Your couch isn't long enough. It kills my neck on the armrest, so it's moot." "Well, you're not getting the bed." I took away Molly's cereal box, which was now just empty cardboard, bent in the shape of a dog head. I said, "You sounded crazy on the news, by the way. I hope you know that." "What? I was telling the truth." "To what purpose exactly? The only people who'll be convinced by that are people who are already nuts. I can see you've got your blog up right now. For what? So you can tell the whole nonsense story and be one more nut job ranting on the internet? It doesn't do anybody any good. It just makes you look crazy. It makes both of us look crazy. Hey, aren't you going to be late for your court-mandated therapist appointment? Fuck you." I glanced at my watch. He was right. The drive through town was surreal. I had to go past the hospital. Okay, I didn't have to, but curiosity got the better of me. And it had the air of a natural disaster. News vans were parked outside of barriers that were blocking the street. Cops were at a checkpoint, directing traffic away from the parking garage entrance. 3 blocks later, I had to wait at an intersection for 5 minutes while a row of green trucks rumbled past. Military. I suddenly wanted to get far away from there. I had half hoped I would find the psychiatrist's office closed today, as if the aftermath of a shooting rampage would be treated like a national holiday. No such luck. People gotta make a paycheck, I guess. I barged in before I realized there was somebody else in the waiting room. Should have looked in through the window or something. I would have waited outside if I'd known, since the potential for really awkward conversation seems pretty high in the waiting room of a psychiatrist's office. I tried to think of a plausible excuse for turning around and leaving. The best I came up with was to grab the potted plant in the corner and just walk out as if it was a rental I was repossessing. I decided not to. The lady in the waiting room didn't even turn to me when I came in. She was transfixed by a television in the corner tuned to Fox News covering the shooting. Jesus, slow news day. People get shot all the time, right? I found a chair as far away from her as possible. I grabbed a magazine and held it in front of my face. Seemed to be a lot of articles about wedding dresses. "It's happening all over, you know," said the woman from the other side of the room. She was probably 45 or so, hair a desperate shade of blonde. I said, "What's that?" "Demon possession. All over the world. You see news from the Middle East and such, and you can see it spreading like wildfire." "Uh-huh. It's easier now that all the souls are gone." I flipped the page in my bridal magazine, acting engrossed in the ads. The only thing worse than always being the craziest person in the room is when suddenly you're alone with someone crazier. She was still talking. "Did you know the rapture happened already? In 1961. The Lord called all the souls up to heaven, but the bodies were left behind. That's why the people walking around today don't seem to have souls. It's because they don't. You see that story last week? The man who was being chased by the police in a stolen car? There was a newborn baby in the back seat. He just threw it out the window. A baby. People these days are just common animals because their human souls are gone, see? I lowered the magazine and said, "That's not a bad theory, actually." They called it the mark of the beast, but they don't need a mark. They reveal themselves as beasts. With time. The door to the office creaked open, and out walked a gorgeous teenage girl. For a baffled second, I thought this was somehow my therapist, like maybe she was filling in today. But of course she was just a patient, and Dr. Tennant was behind her. The crazy woman in the waiting room stood and thanked the doctor, and walked out with the girl. The lady hadn't been there for treatment. She was just giving her daughter a ride. Right off, Dr. Tennant asked, "What happened to your eye?" "Got in a fight with John. He said counseling was a waste of time, and I told him I'd be damned if I'd hear him insult you and your profession." "You look like you haven't slept." "How can I? With what's going on? Have you been watching the news today? Do you know if they found Frankie?" "He wasn't expected to live, was he? Did you know him?" "What? No. Why would I have known him?" "You called him Frankie." "Well, I went to high school with him, but that was years ago. I didn't have anything to do with what happened, if that's what you mean." "Not at all. Because I didn't. I'm sorry if I made you feel accused." I glanced out the window at the exact moment a green truck rumbled by on the street outside. Why are there so many army trucks? This all seems like an overreaction, don't you think? Not letting me change the subject, Tennant said, "I would like to come back to what you talked about last time, about having to hide your true self from the world, and feeling like you are powerless to become the type of person who would not have to hide. Just now, you seemed to feel I was accusing you. I'd like to talk about that if we can." I stared out the window and chewed a fingernail. Man, I did not want to be here. In this office, in this town, in this life. I wanted to just walk out. I knew at some point the cops were going to scoop up John. He'd appeared on goddamn television right in the area they were trying to quarantine. And that meant eventually they'd come get me, too. What the hell was I doing here? Because you have nowhere else to go. I said, "I don't know. 24 hours ago, I'm sitting here trying to justify believing crazy things, and one day later, the whole town has gone crazy. So in my mind, the rest of the world is now caught up to my craziness, which means I should be set free." I rubbed my itchy eyes and said, "There are real monsters, Doc. I'm too tired today to say anything else." He said, "I read some of the things you and your friend posted on the internet. Sometimes you speak of yourself as if you are a freak or a monster." "Well, metaphorically. I mean, aren't we all? The woman in the waiting room just now basically told me the same thing." "An incident like last night always brings out those kind of feelings, I suppose." I considered for a moment, then said, "Can I ask you a question, Doc?" "Of course." "What would you say if I asked to use your computer there, on your desk, right now, without you having a chance to delete anything?" "Of course, there is confidential patient information that I couldn't..." "Let's say I could promise I wouldn't look at any of that. In fact, let's say I just want to look at your internet browser history. How would you feel about that?" "It would be an invasion of privacy, of course. And I have credit cards and logins." "I'm talking about the porn, Doc. Would I find nasty schoolgirl porn on there? Maybe interracial stuff? Incest fantasies?" "I feel like you're trying to get a reaction from me. If you're not feeling like going through with the session, we can continue on Monday." "No, listen. When I'm with Amy and I ask to borrow her computer, she passes it right over. No questions asked. No hesitation. She could sit there and look over my shoulder and watch me sift through every single file, and she wouldn't flinch. She has nothing to hide. It'd be the same if I had a machine that could peer into her mind. She'd be fine with it. She's comfortable with what she is. But on the other hand, if she's visiting and she asks to use my laptop, man, there is so much depraved shit on there that if she saw it all, she'd call the cops. If she could see what goes through my mind when I see another girl walk by, she'd burst into tears. He nodded. So you feel like you have to hide a part of yourself, and she doesn't. I'm saying it's like that with everybody. There are two kinds of people on planet Earth, Batman and Iron Man. Batman has a secret identity, right? So Bruce Wayne has to walk around every second of every day knowing that if somebody finds out his secret, his family is dead. His friends are dead. Everyone he loves gets tortured to death by costumed supervillains. And he has to live with the weight of that secret every day, that tension gnawing in his guts. But not Tony Stark. He's open about who he is. He tells the world he's Iron Man. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't have that shadow hanging over him. He doesn't have to spend energy building up those walls of lies around himself. You're one or the other. Either you're one of those people who has to hide your real self because it would ruin you if it came out, because of your secret fetishes or addictions or crimes, or you're not one of those people. And the two groups aren't even living in the same universe. You believe you're Batman. I closed my eyes. What did you say the hourly rate for these sessions was again? I mean, you're in that category. You feel like the people around you would react badly if they knew what you really thought and believed. Not because they'll think I'm crazy. They already think that. But because of how they would react once they knew the truth. You know how people are. That's what you write books about, right? Group panics and all that. You think the truth would cause mass hysteria. I shrugged and nodded toward the window. Look out there. You'll see. He said, that's actually more true than you know. Don't repeat this, but it appears I'm going to be called in to work on this case. The hospital shooting, I mean. What, like as a profiler or something? Oh, no. I'd be offering my assistance in dealing with the public. It's the panic that is the primary concern, you see. Making sure no one gets a hair trigger. Some poor soul waiting by their back door with a hunting rifle, shooting at a shadowy shape in their backyard that turns out to be their neighbor. Fear can be fatal, and, as I suppose you see on my bookshelf, I'm something of an expert. I thought, that has to be nice, to have a job where fear is something that happens to other people. I stared out the window and said, do you ever get scared, Dr. Tennant? Of course. But you know these sessions aren't about me. And besides, in your world everything has some harmless explanation, right? It's always bees. Even this thing with Frankie. Your job will be, what? To go up to a bank of microphones and assure everybody that it's all bees? You feel like I was being dismissive of your fears. I apologize if so. So does anything scare you, Doctor? Anything irrational? Of course. Here, I'll volunteer my most embarrassing example. I feel like I owe it to you to make up for the bee story. Are you a fan of science fiction? I don't know. My girlfriend is. All right. But you know Star Trek and Beam Me Up, Scotty. How they can teleport people around. Yeah, the transporters. Do you know how they work? Just special effects, CGI or whatever they used. No, I mean within the universe of the show. They work by breaking down your molecules, zapping you over a beam, and putting you back together on the other end. Sure, that is what scares me. I can't watch it. I find it too disturbing. I shrugged. I don't get it. Well, think about it. Your body is just made of a few different types of atoms. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and so on. So this transporter machine, there is no reason in the world to break down all of those atoms and then send those specific atoms thousands of miles away. One oxygen atom is the same as another. So what it does is send the blueprint for your body across the beam. Then it reassembles you at the destination out of whatever atoms it has nearby. So if there is carbon and hydrogen at the planet you're beaming down to, it'll just put you together out of what it has on hand, because you get the exact same result. Sure. So it's more like sending a fax than mailing a letter. Only the transporter is a fax machine that shreds the original. Your original body, along with your brain, gets vaporized. Which means what comes out the other end isn't you. It's an exact copy that the machine made, of a man who is now dead, his atoms floating freely around the interior of the ship. Only within the universe of the show, nobody knows this. Meanwhile, you are dead. Dead for eternity. All of your memories and emotions and personality end right there on that platform forever. Your wife and children and friends will never see you again. What they will see is this unnatural photocopy of you that emerged from the other end. And in fact, since transporter technology is used routinely, all of the people you see on that ship are copies of copies of copies of long-dead, vaporized crew members. And no one ever figures it out. They all continue to blithely step into this machine that kills 100% of the people who use it. But nobody realizes it because each time it spits out a perfect replacement for the victim at the other end. I stared at him. Why did you tell me that? He shrugged. You asked. His face showed nothing. I thought of the Asian guy, casually disappearing into the magic burrito door, walking out somewhere else. And in that moment, I almost asked Tennant what he knew and who he was. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have changed anything. 18 hours prior to outbreak. Hours went by, and the cops continued to not show up at either my house or John's apartment. All morning I was worried sick about what I would say when they brought me in, but then afternoon came and I was even more worried about the fact that they weren't coming after us. That meant things had gotten so out of control that we were no longer on their list of priorities. Come mid-afternoon, I found myself at work, standing behind a counter, trying to peel the magnetic anti-theft tag off a DVD with my fingernail. A DVD is a disc that plays movies if they don't have those by the time you listen to this. I know I've complained about the pain in my eye and shoulder more than once, but I want to point out that the bite on my leg was also starting to hurt like a son of a bitch. I would have called in sick, but I had used up all of my sick days for the year and couldn't take off again until January. I take a lot of sick days, most of them self-declared mental health days, meaning I wake up in a mood that I know will lead me to assault the very first person who asks me if the 2-day rentals have to be back on Wednesday or Thursday. I had worked at Wally's Video for 5 years, been a manager for 2. I started right after I dropped out of college. At the time, I had heard that Quentin Tarantino got discovered while working at a video store, and I think I had it in my head to try to work there and write a screenplay. It was going to be about a cop in the future with a sentient flamethrower for an arm. At age 19, that seemed like a pretty sound plan. The thing about not having parents is you don't have anyone to tell you you're heading down a path paved with grossly inaccurate expectations of what the world owes you. The people who raised me, and I'll leave their names out of this, they did what they could. Nice people, real religious. Kinda treated me like I was a little African refugee kid they had rescued. They knew my story, knew that I had never known my dad. Years later, when I got in trouble at school and got kicked out because of that kid that died, they were real supportive. Took my side all the way through, then shortly after they moved to Florida and hinted that maybe things would be better if I stayed behind. My birth mom is living in Arizona, I think, staying with a dozen other people in an arrangement that could be called a compound. She sent me a letter 2 years ago, 30 pages scribbled on lined notebook paper. I couldn't make it past the first paragraph. I skipped down to the last sentence, which was, "I hope you are stockpiling ammunition like I told you. The forces of the Antichrist will first seek to disarm us." I scraped the plastic theft sticker off the DVD, put it back in its case, then picked another case off the stack, pulled out the disc, started scraping off the tag. I looked around, saw there was only one customer in the store, a guy wearing a cowboy hat. His jeans looked like they were painted on. The TV we had mounted in the far corner of the store was supposed to be playing a promotional DVD, but I had switched it over to headline news with the sound down and the closed captioning turned on. They had been going back to the hospital shooting every 20 minutes or so. The cowboy with the tight pants came up to the counter with a copy of Basic Instinct 2 and 2001: A Space Odyssey. How could he walk in those jeans? Did they inflate when he farted? I glanced up at the TV and saw a reporter standing in front of a street barricade. Closed captioning mentioned something about cops having to break up an angry crowd trying to get in to see loved ones at the hospital. The cowboy gave me his membership card, and I punched in the number. His account came up as name, James Dupree. Overdue, 0. Account status, A. Comments: this man has worn the same trousers since he was a toddler. Many memos had circulated at Wally's about abusing the customer comment box on the computer. We have John to thank for that. He worked here a few years ago, after I begged the manager to let him on. John was fired a few months later, but not before he managed to add something to the comment field for pretty much every single customer he served. Name, Carl Gass. Comments: if he doesn't have late charges and you tell him that he does, he loses his fucking mind. Name, Lisa Franks. Comments: had sex with her on 11/15. Name, Kara Bullock. Comments: thinks I have an English accent, don't forget. Name, Chet Birak. Comments: always smells like fish. I think he fishes for a living. He's sensitive about it, so don't bring it up. Name, Rob Arnold. Comments: it's the white Patrick Ewing. Name, Cheryl Mackey. Comments: had sex with her on 7/16. I gave the cowboy his change, glancing over his shoulder at the TV every chance I could get. They were back to old footage from the hospital, the camera showing close-ups of bullet holes in walls and shell casings on the floor. The cowboy turned to follow my gaze, saw the TV. That's some scary shit, ain't it? I said, yeah. Old world's coming to an end, that's what I think. Yeah, probably. Nigger in the White House? Yeah. The cowboy left. He stuffed his wallet into his back pocket, and I imagined it shooting back out again, squeezed by the sheer pressure of the fabric. I grabbed a DVD and went back to peeling off stickers. I'd gotten written up 6 weeks ago because more DVDs were stolen on my watch than either of the other two managers. Not sure what I was supposed to be doing to stop it, other than running out and tackling the kids who tried to walk out with the goods. The problem, I decided, was the magnetic anti-theft tags that would activate the door alarm were in the DVD cases, not on the discs. So it only took the thieves minutes to figure out. They just had to pop the disc out of the case and stuff it in their pocket, leaving the case and the theft tag behind. Yes, this town has people who are actually too poor to afford a computer and internet connection to just pirate the movies that way. So I wrote up this angry email to the head office, saying the anti-theft system was idiotic and that if they were serious about people not stealing discs, then they should put the anti-theft tags on the discs themselves. They agreed, and I and 2 other employees spent about 12 hours sticking these stiff little stickers to all of the new releases in the store. The plan worked beautifully. That is, until last Thursday when a customer brought in a disc that had been scratched to hell because the theft sticker came unstuck inside his DVD player. It jammed the little tray when it tried to eject the disc, and he had to pry it out. 2 days later, a customer brought in a broken DVD player. When his disc got stuck, thanks to the sticker, he wound up breaking the disc tray on the machine trying to free it. I wasn't at the store that day. I was on one of my many sick days. But when I came back, I was greeted by 27 emails from managers and regional managers and other people I had never heard from before, telling me that every anti-theft sticker had to be removed from every DVD by November 5th. I bring this up in case you were wondering why in the holy hell I felt the need to come into work in the middle of what appeared to be some kind of monster infestation. The answer is that if I took one more sick day, I would be fired. And if I didn't get these stickers off by the deadline, I would be fired. And even if I could talk my way out of one firing, I sure as hell couldn't talk my way out of both. And if I was fired, soon after society would decide I wasn't earning my electricity and water and my house and my food. And they'd be right. If you think that's a bad reason to come to work in the middle of all this, then I'm guessing you're still living with Mom and Dad. I glanced up at the TV and saw something new. Security camera footage from inside the hospital. In color, but in a frame rate that made the people appear to blink down the hallway, teleporting 5 feet at a time. It was a shot of a woman running in terror. They cut back to the studio and some older guy in a suit, an expert of some kind they had brought in. Then they cut back to the security video, and I froze. I heard the DVD I was holding fall to the counter. Did I just see that? They played it again. The first frame was Frankie in the hall of the hospital, holding a nurse around the throat. The frames rolled forward. A security guard came into frame, hand out, trying to talk Frankie down. Next frame, same players, limbs in different positions. Looked to be about 1 frame per second. The next frame was what got me. At the top of the screen appeared a man in black, and I mean all black, head to toe. A solid black shape. Next frame, 1 second later, he was gone. I stared. They cut back to the anchor. The closed captioning lagged behind, but I didn't think I saw any mention of the mysterious figure in the hall. My cell phone screamed. I picked up. Yeah? John said, Dave? Can you get to a television? We got one on here. I saw it. The thing in the hall? Yeah. Man in black? Shadow Man. Whatever. Man, this isn't a joke anymore. It wasn't a joke before, John. A bunch of people died. You know what I mean. You better sleep with your crossbow tonight. I don't have the crossbow. The cops confiscated it, remember? Okay, then I should come over. I'll bring my lighter. We'll sleep in shifts. No, wait, bring your what? Come on, man. How do you know Frankie won't show up there? He's surely dead by now. I didn't say he wasn't. I'm busy, John. Sure. I'll try to come up with a plan. Or whatever. Watch the shadows. Hey, John, don't do anything stupid. I was talking to a dead phone. 17 hours prior to the outbreak. Disclaimer. The following sequence of events was relayed by John to the author after the fact, and no attempt was made to corroborate this version of events through witness interviews. While there is no evidence directly contradicting any of this account, much of it seems highly unlikely. John wound up needing 5 hours to find Frankie Burgess. That may sound impressive to you, considering there were rows of trained, uniformed men fanning out across several square miles around the hospital all day Friday without success, but it actually took longer than John was hoping. It wasn't until 8 p.m. that he found himself face-to-face with Frankie across a pane of dirty glass, and he had been hoping to have the whole situation wrapped up while it was still daylight. Night is when bad things happen, undisclosed. Well, bad things also happen in the daytime, but at least you can see where you're going when you're running away. Anyway, in early November, night falls at around 6. So after getting off the phone with Dave at the video store at 3, John had spent an hour driving around in his caddy and getting a sense of the situation around town. The manhunt, which seemed to involve several hundred police, volunteers, and National Guardsmen, appeared to be focused on the wooded area east of the hospital and the empty houses and trailers around it. It made sense from their point of view, he supposed. They were looking for a spot where a deranged and wounded man would crawl off to die. But they weren't going to find Frankie. It wasn't going to be that easy. There were local cops who had to know better, who had to know that the situation at the hospital had been that other thing, the kind of business that pops up in undisclosed every few years when the town decides to start coloring outside the lines. John was picturing the chief trying to nudge the National Guard in that direction, maybe suggesting that they expand the search and that maybe additional precautions should be taken with the quarantine. Special hearing protection, perhaps, or hazmat suits. And instead of just the hospital, maybe rope off the whole town. Or state. But then that would lead to a lot of awkward questions, and the chief would quickly back down and just pray that the whole thing would come to nothing. If only it ever worked out that way. John, on the other hand, was thinking monster from the start since, the situation was caused by a monster. It was just a matter of figuring out what kind of monster it was. There are really only two kinds of monsters in the world, which you already know if you've been watching horror movies. Breeders and non-breeders. So, for instance, Frankenstein's monster would fall into the second category if he was real. He's a freak, a singular being, and once you kill him, he's gone. Problem solved. The breeders are an exponentially bigger problem. Within that group, you've got slow breeders, like vampires, if they were real, which they're not, which breed in a small-scale controlled way, but mainly to avoid extinction rather than spread. But then you've got the fast breeders, like zombies, if they existed, which they don't, where breeding is all they do. They are basically walking epidemics and are the worst of the worst-case scenarios, because such a creature could, hypothetically, wipe out civilization. This is humanity's greatest fear, which is why at the moment, half of the world's horror novels, movie posters, and video games have zombies on the cover. So, in any situation like this, step 1 is to find out what category of creature you're dealing with. Step 2 is to anticipate what the creature is going to do next, based on what you determine in step 1. Then step 3 is you find out if the thing can be killed with a chainsaw. This particular case was a fairly straightforward situation of a small creature taking over a man's head and controlling his body. That is a really specific thing for a creature to do, John thought, requiring countless specialized biological adaptations, so it was unlikely that it was just some kind of Frankenstein-style genetic mistake with no goal beyond stumbling around biting people until somebody shot it enough times. So logically, that would mean it was a breeder, and that the taking over of a human body was done to facilitate breeding. What had John worried was that the little shit looked like an insect, and in the normal course of things, insects are notoriously fast breeders. So it could be a worst-case scenario. John suspected that somebody up the ladder had already arrived at that conclusion, which is why, on this fine autumn afternoon, you couldn't pull up to a stoplight in Undisclosed without finding yourself in a Humvee sandwich. It's also, presumably, why the hospital had been roped off. How much of Frankie's brain was still intact? His body still functioned, despite the damage it had taken. So the basic nervous and muscular systems must still have been operated by his own human brain. So there surely had to be some remnant of Frankie's instincts and impulses in there. And Frankie was a cop. John could think of 5 shops in town that sold donuts, none of which said they had seen Frankie when John called. Where else did cops eat? John drove past a half-dozen fast food franchises and didn't see Frankie inside when he passed. It was getting frustrating. Only 2 hours of light left now. Then, John swung by a Waffle House and found what he was looking for. Waffles. He was good and hungry by that point, and let's face it, it had been an eat breakfast for dinner kind of day. Blueberry waffles, hash browns, washed down with a beer he found in his jacket. Around 5, John dropped by Munch's trailer,